Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank all of you for joining. It's Chairman Roberto Alves of the Connecticut Democrats, and I am extremely excited to be here today. We have our DNC Chairman, Ken Martin, who took some time out of his day to come and talk to Connecticut. And not only do we have him, I want to thank our host panel who's here as well. We have Vice Chairman Jimmy Ticky. Hi, Jimmy. And Jimmy and I will field some questions later on. But please note that while our chair is speaking, please put your questions into our chat box. We will do our best to get to the questions as they come in, but then we'll field questions directly to Chairman Martin a little bit later in the hour. But we also have a big friend of Connecticut's and familiar to all of us, dear friend of mine, and I know a friend of Ken's. We have former chairperson, our DNC member, Nancy DiNardo. Nancy, thank you so much for being on our host panel, for being here, and I want to kick it off to you, Nancy.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, today I have the great honor of introducing a very good friend and a great leader. I met Ken Martin more than a decade ago, and I worked with him in his capacity as the state party chair of Minnesota. Ken has a long resume in politics, but I'm highlight some of it because otherwise I'll take up most of the time on the call if I talked about everything Ken has done. In 1990, he began interning for the late Senator Paul Wellstone. In 1992, he served as the state director for Minnesota Party. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He served as the state director for Gore 2000. And then he became state party chair in 2011. And as the chairman, Ken led his state through 25 statewide wins all in a row. In 2017, he was elected chair of what we call the ASDC, which stands for Association of State Democratic Committees. And he was at that time the vice chair at the DNC. And as we all know, he was just elected as DNC chair this past February. And Ken reaches out to people to get involved in the party process. He includes them in his decision-making. He is really a people's person. And he's the guy who returns phone calls and listens to what the people are saying at the other end of the phone. Ken has been a pleasure to work with over the years, and I was proud to support him as chair of the DNC. And I'm proud to introduce him today. So let's welcome Chairman Ken Martin.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for everything you've done, for your friendship, your support over the years, and for your leadership of this party for many, many years. And of course, to the new chair, Mayor Alves, so great to see you again. You know, one of the things about your new chair, which was still one of the highlights of my time in National Harbor, Maryland for the election was the chairman brought his young son to that meeting. And you know, it just was really neat to meet his son, and his son was so interested in meeting me, but also being there for this momentous occasion of the election of our new party officers. And I just really was taken by that, Roberto. So thank you for your leadership already and what you're doing there for the Connecticut Democratic Party. Thank you to Adrian Billings-Smith, and of course, my really great friend, Vice Chair Jimmy Ticky, for all he's done as well for Connecticut and for the Democratic Party there. I also want to do a shout out to, I'm not sure if he's on the call, but my great friend Eric Russell, your treasurer, and his husband Christopher, who are great friends as well. Thank you to all of you, as well as to Sarah, Mackenzie, Dave, and Desiree, the whole Connecticut Dem staff for all the work you do day in, day out, tireless work to help build this party. You know, I want to start by just saying that something I believe in is that the future of the Democratic Party is about organizing everywhere. I believe passionately that when you organize everywhere, you can win anywhere. And we know that when you ignore red states, they are never going to turn purple or blue. And when you ignore blue states, right, like Connecticut and other blue states, we actually lose ground. We have to invest everywhere. We have to organize everywhere. We have to recognize that if we're going to be a national party, we can't just be a party fighting in 7 battleground states and in a few congressional seats. And we have to build this party holistically basically up and down the ballot. And that future starts right now. I haven't been at this job very long, but I've sure learned something already, which is everybody in DC just wants to win the argument. And not me. I'm here to win elections. And it's important right now that we get people unified in this party and focused on what we need to do to take power back. Elections, of course, aren't won in DC. You all know that. They're won in places like Connecticut. They're won in cities and towns and counties. They're won by going door to door, neighbor to neighbor, person to person, by building direct relationships with voters in their communities, and by building out cutting-edge organizing infrastructure. Now, that's why the DNC is already making historic new investments in state parties. Thanks to Nancy and your new chairman, the reality is we reached a historic agreement that will make sure that we're investing more resources than ever before in the grassroots of this party. It's why we've already made historic investments in 2025 races to set the tone and to regain electoral ground at every level of the ballot. Think about this. Since Donald Trump's inauguration, there's been 25 special elections, and we have overperformed in 24 of the 25, and of course, just won a critical mayor's race in Omaha, Nebraska. And so it's really important for us to realize that for us to regain power, we have to build from the grassroots up, and we have to make those investments everywhere. This model, our organizing everywhere model, has already started working. As I said, we're winning these critical races, and I'll share a little bit more about that in a minute. But first, let me just say that we're doing new things at the DNC. It's not the status quo anymore, far from it. And partly because we understand this is the fight of a lifetime. Donald Trump and his enablers are using their power not to help people, not to improve people's lives, but to inflict the maximum amount of harm. They're destroying the economy, they're ripping up the Constitution, and they're creating a White House fueled by corruption. What I see right now from this administration and from the Republicans who control Congress is an attempt to wreak harm and havoc on Americans. Now, I'm from Minnesota, so I have to quote a great Minnesotan, Hubert Humphrey, who once said that the moral test of government is how government treats those in the dawn of life, our children, those in the twilight of life, our seniors, and those in the shadows of life, the sick and the handicapped. And I want to ask you, is this Republican Party and Donald Trump meeting that moral test right now when they're stealing food away from starving children, when they're potentially kicking the elderly out of their nursing homes, when they're cutting the social safety net that protects the sick and the handicapped and the disabled in this country? The answer is no. Right now, this bill in front of the American people and in front of Congress, it's an immoral budget that would destroy the lives of so many Americans and shatter communities far and wide throughout this country. And my old boss, Paul Wellstone, used to say, look, if you're not willing to fight like hell for the things you believe in, do you really believe in them at all? I'm going to ask you all that question. Because right now in this moment, what Democrats, and I would argue Americans, are looking for from our party is us to stand up, to grow a spine, fight for the things we care about, fight for their families, and fight for their communities. Now, look, if one man unchecked and enabled by others can do this much damage in a mere 100-ish days, I hate to envision what he's capable of over the span of 4 years. But here's the positive. There are cracks in the veneer. The public tide is shifting against Trump. His approval ratings are underwater. People are pissed off, they're pessimistic and unhappy. In large part, the tide is shifting because Democrats are doing our part. We're finding our footing. And as I said the day I got elected chair, we've taken the gloves off. We're empowering all levels of our Democratic Party. Our leaders in Congress and across state legislatures are making a strong and honest case against Trump day in, day out. Governors, attorneys general, judges are upholding the rule of law and stepping in to prevent the autocratic overreach of this administration. Mayors and council members, school board leaders, and municipal officials are acting as the local advocates for the families, communities, and small businesses being scorched by Trump's agenda. This is the fight I'm focused on. And this is why I'm focused on winning elections. And how we do make sure, we have to make sure, I should say, that our words like fight, don't become hollow. What do I mean by that? we can't just say we're going to fight and then just sit back and do nothing. I don't have a perfect answer on this, but I will challenge myself and offer a challenge to all of you and to our party. We have to meet the potency of our words with twice as much hard work in the political trenches between now and the midterms. I invite you to join me in those trenches. I need your support, your partnership, and your expertise. The Connecticut Democratic Party needs your support, which is why I'm grateful all of you have showed up today to support this wonderful party. The work that they're going to do to help us win up and down the ballot in Connecticut is critical to the National Democratic Party's ability to actually turn the page on what we're seeing right now in this country. So if you haven't given, please give. If you've given, please give more. I know we've always counted on you, and you certainly did your part last year. And we do not take your support for granted. We never will. We will continue to learn from what happened last year to inform our strategies and investments this year, next year in the midterms, and of course, leading into 2028. But before I finish, let me just spend a little bit of time talking about some specific things we've invested in, launched, and created at the DNC during my tenure. And then I'd love to take questions. First, we're focusing on an agenda that unites families across race, age, background, and class. Now, I'm from Minnesota, and I always say that the thing that unites a corn farmer in the southern part of the state, a steel worker up on the Iron Range, and a new refugee in the Twin Cities, what unites them is that each has a job, each has a dream for their family, and each wants to live safe and secure lives. And many of them are working harder than ever before and feeling like they're falling behind, feeling like the American dream is so distant that they'll never achieve it, feeling like people have forgotten about them. We as a Democratic Party have to be their champion. No matter where you're from, no matter where you live, no matter who you love and who you are, the Democratic Party has to fight for every family in this country, for every person in this country, and every community. Now, second, we're fighting back, which is why we've launched a 24/7, 365-day-a-year organizing program with a permanent war room and a permanent people's cabinet. We're not simply going to react to Trump's lies. We're going on the offense, setting the tone and putting Republicans on the back foot. It's going to be unrelenting, and it already has. And look, third, we're coordinating in new and innovative ways. That's why I'm establishing a modern-day coordinated campaign to focus beyond just the next presidential election. We will coordinate with our partners, including regional, state, and local Democrats, to win races up and down the ballot and across the country. Since the beginning of the year, we've already invested in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and won there. We've set the marker with historic performances in deep red Florida. We've overperformed in nearly every off-year race, as I said. And right now, of course, we have a bit of momentum on our side. I know some days it doesn't feel so, but we do. The wind is at our back. But I don't believe, as some have suggested, like James Carville and others, that we just get out of the way and rely on Trump failing to win. Relying on someone failing to win is a piss-poor strategy. We have the opportunity right now, as the momentum's on our side, as people are pissed off at what's happening in this country, right? When people are mad on the attacks on Medicaid and Social Security and on these cuts that are devastating our communities, we have the momentum, of course. But we won't win if we don't take advantage of the opportunity to engage people in a meaningful conversation about what the future looks like. And what that means is, while we resist Donald Trump with everything we have, and we have to, we also have to give the American people and folks in Connecticut a sense of what we're fighting for as well, and why, and how their lives would be materially different if they put us back in power. So to wrap up, let me just say this. I'm done with Democrats myopically focusing on a few battlegrounds every few years, as I said. We are not simply a presidential campaign committee. The DNC is now the primary hub for building out a permanent political organizing movement across every part of the country. I've always said that there's no such thing as a perpetual red state, and there's also no such thing as a perpetual blue state. My job is to prove that we can actually keep blue states blue and turn red states purple to blue. We can and have to mobilize, organize, fight back, and win. So please consider contributing with the QR code on your screen or at Connecticut, ctdems.org/support. You can see the QR code up there and the link. It's really critical. We cannot take states like Connecticut for granted. We have to win and we have to win throughout the state. What you do today helps our national party actually stop Donald Trump dead in his tracks. And look, if we handle things right in the years ahead, and I have faith that we will, I believe we will look back at this moment as when our party started to turn the page and started building a long-term majority. The last thing I'll say is this. I'm not here to win elections. When people hear me say that, they say, what the hell are you talking about? You're the chair of the DNC. What do you mean you're not here to win elections? Well, frankly, none of you are either. We have to win elections. Of course, we have to win elections, but that's not our end goal. You see, the reality is sometimes we treat elections and campaigns as a sport. We pat ourselves on the back when we win. We go home and say the fight's over. Well, the reality is the reason we fight hard to win elections is so we can elect people who share our values to office, so they can pass good public policy to improve people's lives, to actually strengthen communities, to build the type of state and America and frankly world that we all deserve. That's what we're fighting for. That's why I do this work. That's why each of you do this work. And we have to remember our why, especially in these dark moments, that winning is the beginning. Winning allows us to actually start to make a difference and to improve people's lives and meet that moral test of government that I mentioned earlier. So thank you so much, Chairman Alvis, for having me. Thank you to my good friend Nancy. Thank you to the Connecticut Dems, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. We appreciate you taking the time of your busy day, and we are incredibly grateful for everything you're doing across our country to fight for our democratic values. And I know that when you use the word fight, it doesn't ring hollow because you are out there fighting every day, and we appreciate the sacrifice it takes on your family as well. So again, from me personally and all of Connecticut, we are extremely grateful that you stepped up to the challenge to lead our party in a time where we know it's hard. With social media and everything going on, the things that we have against us, you doing this means a lot to all of us in our most dire time here, in our constitutional crisis, when our democracy is in peril. And these are very important times. So let's just get to the questions, though. And I'm incredibly grateful for everything you're doing. I'll lead off. I have one that I wrote down here. And in this time with all the disinformation we see that is rampant, and voter fatigue is something that's been happening. Can you just explain to Connecticut what the DNC is currently doing, what you plan on doing to cut through a lot of that noise, but make sure that we can really create these emotional connections with our voters, not just in red states, purple states, but in our blue states as well, to make sure they stay engaged and ready to fight?
Yeah, there's really three things. Let me start with the first thing about misinformation and disinformation. And this is getting a little wonky and in the weeds, but it's important to understand that misinformation and disinformation is the number one and most pervasive issue we're dealing with in politics. It has such a suppressive impact on our voter turnout throughout the country. And this is both foreign actors and domestic actors who are actually pushing out misinformation and disinformation to actually influence elections. And so we've launched a war room here at the DNC that's bringing in experts from Homeland Security in the Biden administration and Obama administration, from the military and intel, to really get our hands around actually how we can combat misinformation and disinformation. Here's what these actors are doing, right? They use misinformation and disinformation to dampen enthusiasm for our candidates, right? By spreading all sorts of lies and misinformation. They use misinformation and disinformation to actually increase cynicism amongst the electorate about the role of government in changing people's lives, essentially making people fearful of government or not believe that government is a catalyst for change, and so they check out. Cynicism is one of the hardest things for us to deal with when people don't want to participate, and it's very orchestrated by the far right. They do their part to raise cynicism amongst the electorate. And the third way they use misinformation and disinformation, of course, is to actually make it harder for people to know how to vote, where to vote, and their rights. And so it's so pervasive. And think about this, Chairman. We had 18 million people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 who did not vote for Kamala Harris in 2024. There's I'm sure, a lot of reasons for it, right? 8 million of those 18 million people showed up and either voted for Trump or a different candidate or skipped that question. But 10 million Democrats stayed home. 10 million. This was the third closest presidential election in the last 100 years, closest congressional margin ever in our. This was not a landslide. This was not a mandate election, but it doesn't take the sting away at all because it was a big gut punch for all of us. So we're standing up the war room to combat misinformation and disinformation. Two, about how we cut through the noise and get to people. We have to do two things, right? And this is where the permanent campaign that we're standing up comes in. One is we need year-round organizing all over the country, including in Connecticut and other states. The first conversation we have with voters should not be asking them to do something for our candidates, our party, which is to vote for us. And by the way, that's then the last conversation we have with them until 2 years later when we show up the same time asking for their vote again. You see, we're not building trust or a relationship with communities. We're not building any sort of durable relationship that lasts beyond election cycles. And as a result, we lost ground with every single part of our coalition last year. And it wasn't a singular occurrence of just last year. We've been losing ground for many years. Part of it is because we no longer invest in year-round organizing, and we're not investing in building a relationship around shared values and trust with communities. We have to shift our organizing model to a relational organizing model away from a transactional organizing model. So how we communicate is important, right? The other side of this is the communications infrastructure. The reality is, in addition to showing up and being present in community all the time, we need to realize that where we got our butts kicked in 2024 was years before we ever got to the election. 20 years ago, corporate America understood that 90% of Americans have one of these, a cell phone. Where they were getting their information, their news, and their entertainment was rapidly changing. So corporate America and the entertainment industry started to move all their content into these spaces. Around 2020, campaigns and elections started to do that out of necessity during the pandemic. We started organizing and communicating in those digital spaces. But where the Republicans were very sophisticated is they had a macro influencer strategy. Again, this is very in the weeds, so I apologize, guys. But they had a macro influencer strategy where they were going on all the podcasts and all these spaces, and we were doing that as well. But the Democratic Party, we were going to news and political podcast and spaces in social media and digital spaces. And guess what? 45% of Americans say they avoid news and politics at all costs. 45%. You know where Trump and the Republicans were going with their social media and digital strategy in 2020? Culture and entertainment. We missed the boat. And so that's on the macro influencer strategy. We need to understand we weren't going to where voters are at. And I'll come back to the micro and nano influencer in a second. I'm a hunter. And people ask me all the time, Chairman, where do you go to hunt? Well, if you're a good hunter, you don't tell them where you're going to hunt, for God's sake. I mean, you never give that up. But you do think about this. If you're hunting deer, it's very simple. You go where the deer are. And so the Republicans were over here, where voters were at getting their information, and we were over here. And I would argue, Chairman, that by the time we got to the election, we had already lost the election because they had defined us before we ever defined ourselves. They were using micro and nano influencers. They would go into communities, find the PTA mom with 1,000 followers, and they would give her a few $100 each month, and they would have her beat the hell out of Joe Biden and the Democratic Party or talk about Donald Trump. They would find a college basketball player on a small college campus and pay her a few $100 a month. And this strategy of using micro and nano influencers, trusted messengers and validators in the community to break through all the noise, and then to go and meet people where they are at through culture and entertainment, that is what we have to do. We have to realize we have to meet voters where they're at and where they're getting information and start campaigning sooner than we have before. Last thing I'll say is this. We have a belief in our party that people don't pay attention to campaigns and elections until 4 to 5 months before an election. So then we flood the zone with all of our organizing, our communications, all of that in the last 5 months, not realizing that the Republican Party, they have a permanent campaign. And they're always campaigning, even when they're governing. So we have to shift the way we do business, and we have to get out there and communicate with voters all the time about our values and what we stand for.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A very great answer there and just so insightful. And I always love your hunting analogies. And those are things we have to talk about, right? We
Yeah.
tie what we're doing to the real world, meet people where they're at. It's the same, some of the things that our Connecticut Democrats are seeing happening across the state. The party's been successful now in the past under Nancy and Jimmy with our trainings. We have been doing year-round organizing. We're going to continue to do that and build under your leadership. So thank you. I want to throw to our Vice Chairman, Jimmy Ticky, to ask a question as well, and then we'll get out there to the folks who have joined.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I am so happy to see that you are leading our Democratic National Committee and got the opportunity to get to know Ken over these last couple of years, and we really have the right person at the helm here of our Democratic National Committee in this moment. We've been talking a lot about year-round organizing in Connecticut with the training series I've started and getting people to have a constant conversation with people rather than just asking for their vote and asking for money requests. And so really appreciate your comments and appreciate the work that you are doing. Every time I turn on TV, you're on TV. I see you all around the country helping our candidates. You are all over the place with Field. You're on with us right now, and you're building up the infrastructure for the party. We're going to go to questions in the chat. If you do have a question, you can put it in the Q&A function in Zoom. But I wanted to ask you, Mr. Chair, we've had a few special elections so far in Connecticut this year. We have won them, and if we have not won them, we have really overperformed. I mean, and one of them is actually in the town that I live in, which is about as Trump-red Republican as you can get, where he won by about 20 to 30 points, while the Democrat lost. The Democrat lost by 4 points. So we're seeing a real surge of energy, and we're seeing that we're really overperforming in these special elections. We've already had many special elections so far this year. What have you seen being on the ground in these special elections, the energy that you're seeing, and then if there's been any interesting tips or other things that we could glean in what campaigns recently, post the 2024 election, have done well?
Yeah, look, this is a really fascinating question. And as I said earlier, Jimmy, we have seen an overperformance in all of the special elections throughout the country this year, and we're winning many of them in spaces that we shouldn't. And, you know, in Florida, in those two congressional races in 6 and 1, there was an overperformance. We didn't win those seats, of course, and so the goal is to win. But let me say in both of those congressional districts, you had Republicans who won those seats in 2024 by 37% and by 30%. We cut both of those margins to less than 15%. What does that suggest right now? And we're seeing a similar size swing around the country, is that if you're a congressional member who won your seat by 15 points or less, right, in the last election cycle, you're in a vulnerable position. And sure enough, you know, I think the Republicans are running scared because they know for sure that, you know, their policies are unpopular. People are certainly mad and pissed off. And it's very similar. I want you to think about 2005 and 2017. In 2017, the Republicans, Trump's first year in office, came after the ACA. There was such a backlash to that. It not only resulted in 2017 us winning big in Virginia and New Jersey, that persisted all the way through 2018 and was a wave election where we won up and down the ballot. 2006, of course, a huge wave that swept us back into both chambers of the House and the Senate. And so very similar years based on what we're seeing right now. But if you look at 05 and 2017 and you look at Bush's approval ratings and Trump's approval ratings at that time, they're actually higher than Trump's approval rating is right now. So what this suggests for us is that if we keep doing this work and keep the pressure on and keep getting out there and organizing, we could have an amazing year next year. But as you know, I don't take anything for granted. We're not going to rely on someone failing to win. We have to take advantage of that. What does that mean? That means that we can't just talk to ourselves. No disrespect to Democrats. I love them. We're Democrats. But if we're just talking to Democrats, we're missing the opportunity to pull in independents and Republican voters right now who are so pissed off with what they're seeing right now that they're moving away from Donald Trump. They're moving away. There's great buyer's remorse out there. So what we have to do, of course, is energize our base, and our base is highly energized. Everywhere I go, we're seeing our Democrats who are unified and energized and ready to fight. But if we don't take advantage of this opportunity to engage in conversations with people who have left us, who stopped voting for Democrats over the years, we're missing an opportunity to actually expand our party and to build long-term majorities. So my point to all of you is what we're seeing right now is unprecedented. We have an opportunity if we're willing to take it, and let's get outside of our comfort zone and start talking to others.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And your comments, both with us today, but also every time I see you in the press, is really around an agenda for working people and working families. And so we're in the Q&A. If anyone has questions, please do put it in the Q&A. We've gotten a couple on this issue. So I'm going to ask you, Elaine and Joan and some others asked about this. They want to know more about the War Room and the People's Cabinet. And if you could explain the work that maybe those entities that you've set up are carrying out every day.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really important piece of the infrastructure we're building. So the War Room has 4 verticals. I mentioned the misinformation and disinformation. It's really critical. It's so important for us to get our hands around that. The second vertical of that work is the daily response. And this is really critical. What does that look like? Well, that means every single day, and starting on June 2nd, in just a couple of weeks, we will be launching what's called the Morning Blueprint. The Morning Blueprint will be a place for all of you, and activists and party leaders and donors and advocacy groups and anyone who wants to join. It's not it's basically, YouTube. I can't remember what platform they're using, but whatever it is, you will join every morning. It'll probably be a half hour long. We will go over, here's what Trump and Vance and Musk and the Republican Party are up to today. Here's what's happening in Washington, D.C. Here's what's happening around the country and around in state capitals throughout the country. Here's our daily strategy. Because right now, we don't need a weekly or monthly strategy. We need a daily strategy on how we're going to respond. We will then go over our talking points, what our strategy is. We'll talk about sample socials that you guys can do. We'll have a call to action every single day. And you'll hear from some of our top surrogates in the morning. So the point is every day we're going to do that starting in early June. I think that's just a couple weeks away, the Morning Blueprint. We've already, and we just did a People's Cabinet response today on these Medicaid cuts. So what is the People's Cabinet? It's subject matter experts from around the country who are not politicians. Why not politicians? Who are the most mistrusted people in America? Politicians. No disrespect to our great Democratic leaders, but we can't keep just putting Democratic politicians forward as our spokespeople. We need to use subject matter experts and others to speak with authority and as trusted messengers on a variety of topics. So for instance, today, I just did a press conference with Secretary Julie Hsu, the former Labor Secretary Miguel Cardona, the former Education Secretary, former Governor Jay Inslee, and Andrew Zimmern from the Food Channel, one of the world's renowned chef, Bizarre Foods, etc., who's also a leading expert on food insecurity. Why is this important? Because today we were hitting back on these cuts to SNAP and Medicaid and doing it in a very personal way and in response to the Republicans and what they're doing. But every single day, in response to the White House press briefing, we will follow that up with a press briefing of our own, where we will essentially refute in real time the bullshit, excuse my language, that the Republican administration is pushing out. The third piece of the daily response is message alignment, and it's about our daily talkers. How many of you, and if I could see, I'd ask for a show of hands, will watch TV in the evening and you'll watch CNN, and you'll see one pundit, a Democratic pundit, say one thing, and you go over to MSNBC and they're saying something completely different. There's no message consistency or message alignment. And so in the late afternoon, before we get into evening programming, we are bringing all of our talkers and talking heads together to try to make sure that we create some message alignment and discipline so we can break through the noise with a consistent message. I'm often reminded of what Will Rogers said: we don't belong to an organized political party, we're Democrats, right? But the reality is, for me, this is one of the biggest Achilles heel we have. We have so many messengers, but not enough message discipline and alignment. So that's the daily response. The third leg of it is the information ecosystem, which I just talked about, mapping out a macro, micro, and nano influencer strategy so that we actually are breaking through with a message. What I didn't mention is last year, Kamala Harris's campaign spent $1 billion on broadcast TV. $1 billion. By the way, consultants make 15 to 20% off of a media buy. That means $150 to $200 million went out to some DC consultant who, excuse my language, doesn't know their ass from a hole in the ground and certainly hasn't set foot in any of our states or talked to voters, right? The reality is I'm in my early 50s. I still read a hard copy of a newspaper every day, and my boys think I'm a nut. But the one thing my wife and I don't do, Jimmy, is we don't watch broadcast TV. I don't know anyone my age who watches broadcast TV. So why in the hell are we investing so much money in a tactic that doesn't work anymore? This information ecosystem is so important because we have to meet voters where they're at. And the fourth vertical of this is, for lack of a better word, subversive, aggressive tactics. And we have to put the Republicans on their back foot. We have to go on offense and litigating this case against Trump. What does that look like? A lot of different ways, but let me give you an example of something I did recently. About a month ago, a child died of measles in Texas. And I sent out a tweet that said Robert Kennedy murdered a kid in Texas today. Now, there's going to be some on this call who are offended by that. I got some calls from some senior ranking elected officials here in DC. Oh, well, I can't believe you did that. Can't believe you went after the Republicans that way. It's too far. We got to preserve the option to work with them. Well, let me tell you, folks, I'm not here to ask for permission. I am here to fight. We are in a war, a literal war with the Republican Party right now. Now is not the time to make friends. Now is not the time for niceties. Now is not the time about worrying if we offend someone. You see, Democrats, someone said to me in 2016, the Republicans are shameless and the Democrats are spineless. Why are we spineless? Because we worry about shit like that. We worry about offending someone. We worry about, let's go out there and actually stand up for what we believe in and throw a punch that's going to land. That's the difference between our parties right now. You see, the Republican Party has no compunction about throwing punches. Sure, they lie and cheat and misinformation and disinformation. I'm not suggesting we need to do any of that. But we have to call these things out for what they are in real time and make sure that the American people know that we're not going to take this stuff laying down. We're going to go on the offense and call them out on their BS. So that's the war room in a nutshell, and it's all sort of launching as we speak. We just brought on our war room director, Tim Hogan, a few weeks ago. We're building all the infrastructure to get all this stuff off the ground as quick as possible, and I'm really excited about it.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Roberto, but just really want to thank you for your comments about this focus on organizing. And for those of you that don't know Ken, but know me, we really do have the right person at the helm of the Democratic National Committee doing this organizing work to not just win in the blue states, but to flip those red seats to blue and to flip those purple seats. We can do this at a federal level, at a statewide level, and this year is a local election year in Connecticut. That's what we're focusing on, all of our municipal races. And with this kind of a strategy, we can win. Back to you, Roberto.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Chairman, one of the common themes that I'm seeing here, and it is countless questions. If I were to read the name, I'd spend more time reading names than I would asking the question. And it's around our young Democrats. It's what is the National Party doing to engage these young Democrats? Many times in certain towns, perhaps across our country, they're told to wait their turn. And that's aggravating when they see stagnant leadership. How can we embrace them, educate them, bring them in, make them part of our solution, give them a voice? And it's not always to run for office. Some of them are going to be great organizers, campaign managers. I know in Connecticut, one of the hardest things for us to find across every town are campaign treasurers, right? How do we build a stronger base of young Democrats, and what's the DNC doing to engage them?
Well, this is a great question. First, let me start by saying that I was a Young Dems president both in Kansas, where I went to school, and then also in my home state of Minnesota. And I think it's really important that we support our youth organizations who are out there doing this work. It's really critical. But it's also incumbent upon us as party leaders to be very deliberate about creating pathways to leadership for people both in the party and folks who want to run for office. We're not intentional enough about that. The thing that drives me crazy is when I hear party leaders say, well, you know what, we can't have this person, this young person, in this role because they haven't served in the party long enough to be chair or to be a vice chair. I mean, that's bullshit. I mean, the reality is that we absolutely have to do a better job of creating opportunities for people to serve at all levels in this party, and I'm committed to that. One thing we did in Minnesota is several years ago, on the 20th anniversary of my mentor's untimely death, Paul Wellstone, we created the Wellstone Academy. The idea that one of the things I thought we should do to honor Paul Wellstone's legacy was to actually train the next generation of organizers, right? And so we created a Wellstone Academy where we pay a stipend of $2,000 a month to 35 people, train them over a year, right? Put them through intensive training, and then guarantee them a job on our coordinated campaign, right? Creating the next generation of organizers and political operatives, right? To help us actually bring more people and more diverse people and more young people into that fold. There's many ways to do this. I also just want to say, because I'm sure some of the comments in there are about this sort of inter-party fight right now between David Hogg and I. And let me just say, I want to be very clear. I support what David and Leaders We Deserve are trying to do, which is to actually make sure that young people and new voices get to run for office and to support them in that effort. I don't mind primarying incumbents. Primaries are a healthy thing in this party. Primaries are important, right? We need to both keep people accountable, at the same time allow new voices into this party and into elected office. The challenge right now is, I believe very passionately that primary voters should be the ones who pick our nominee and not party bosses. No party boss at any level should ever put their thumb on the scale and say, this is who we support, because it sends a message to young people. It sends a message to other people that the party leaders' voice is more important than theirs, and their voice isn't wanted in the party. Neutrality means, again, we're going to respect the will of primary voters. We're not going to support incumbents or challengers. Our job as party leaders is to stay out and then work our asses off for whoever ends up getting elected. And look, I want to be very clear, because there's a narrative out there that somehow this was pushed because of David's attempt to primary incumbents. Nancy and Jimmy and many others know, not only did I campaign on this, I've been a longtime reformer in the Democratic Party to democratize the DNC. I brought the superdelegate reform and the first neutrality pledge forward in 2017. I brought this forward in my party even before that in Minnesota. This is a long-held belief of mine and has nothing to do with David. I just was with David last night. We had an hour-and-a-half long conversation, and he and I are very aligned on this, which is I support his efforts to get more young people into public office and to get more young people into the party. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jim, do you want to field another question?
Sure. We got a question here, many similar to this, but Bill asked specifically, what can the party do to really bring back lower income and working class voters who we seem to have lost in 2024?
Great question. As you know, Jimmy, I'm the first card-carrying union member to be a DNC chair, come out of the building trades. I will tell you, at the end of the day, it's really critical for us to really focus on a working class agenda again. Last year, there was a poll that showed, it's just crazy. It should have been the red flag, the canary in the coal mine for all of us. There was a poll that showed, for the first time in modern history, the perceptions of the two parties has changed. The majority of Americans now believe that the Republican Party best represents the interest of the working class and the poor, and the Democratic Party is a party of the wealthy and the elites. I mean, that's crazy. That's a damning indictment on our party. That's not who we are, but that's what people believe. Perceptions are hard to change. And the reality is, a lot of hardworking people have left our party because they don't believe that we're fighting for them anymore or their families. And that's wrong. And, at the end of the day, we are. But we didn't do a good enough job of clearly connecting the policies we support, back to their lives. Let me give you an example of that. In the state of Missouri, they passed a minimum wage increase, paid family leave, and abortion protections on the ballot, all by wide margins. Those same voters went down the ballot and voted for Trump and the Republicans. See, our policies are popular, but our brand is not. People are already preconditioned to believe that Democrats are the party of the educated and the elite, and as a result, they've left us. So how do we get them back? Well, we focus on an economic agenda, particularly in this moment, right, where Trump already has devastated the economy and people are struggling more than they have before. This is our chance to really focus on an economic agenda that gives them a sense that we're going to fight for them and their families. As I said, no matter where you're from, where you live, no matter who you love or who you are, we have to give a sense that we're going to fight for them. Yet we've given up on many people, especially working people who don't believe anymore that we're going to deliver for them. So part of the challenge for us, of course, is focusing on an agenda and an economic agenda that actually gives them hope, communicating that out and meeting them where they're at and building a relationship around that agenda and those values. And the third part of it, Jimmy, is this: delivering. You see, what happens is sometimes when Democrats get in office, they forget why the hell they ever ran for these positions, and they don't stand up and use the power they have. You know, in 2022, in Minnesota, we won back our trifecta. The governor, who many of you know now, Governor Walz, my good friend, and I sat down with our legislative leaders, and Governor Walz said, you know, look, power is fleeting. We need to use the power we have right now to make a difference in people's lives. And what good is power if you sit on it? So let's use the power we have when we have it to make the biggest difference we can. And I added to all those legislators in the room, I said, look, and if we lose, we still win. And people said, well, what do you mean if we lose, we still win? Well, you still win because you pass public policy that's actually going to materially change people's lives for the better. Again, perceptions and feelings are what people vote on, not issues and policy. And when they feel that their lives are getting better, when they feel that people are actually standing up and fighting for them, when they feel that people are actually going to deliver on the promises they make, that's how we win back working class people. And let me say this, we started to, and I don't know where this happened, Jimmy, we started to message to smaller and smaller parts of our coalition over the years. And as a result of trying to be this to this group and this to that group, we actually lost the thing that connects all those groups. And you know what connects all those groups? Economics. Everyone has a job. Everyone's busting their ass. Many people are working harder than they ever have before, and that American dream seems so distant and so out of reach that they feel like they're failing. And all they want is a champion, someone who sees them, someone who hears them, and someone who's going to fight for them. And we have to get out of the policy speak and speak as real people and understand behind every number is a family. Behind every spreadsheet is a community. And behind every single policy conversation we have is someone who's just wondering where in the hell do they fit in this conversation. I spend a lot of time in union halls, as you do, Jimmy, as you do, Chairman. You guys spend a lot of time out there talking to working class people. Their values are with us. We just have to go out there and communicate the right way and bring them back in a sincere way. Do not write off people who were with us who voted for Donald Trump. That would be a big mistake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope everybody enjoyed this as much as I did. We are so grateful for your time. Connecticut Democrats, don't give up the fight. Keep going. We need you now more than ever. You see the QR code here. Support us. Go to ctdems.org. Please donate. Help us get the messages out and join us at other events. We had so many here today. Next time we do something like this, I encourage you to invite 2 or 3 friends. We need to grow our base. We need to grow participation. We are going on statewide listening tours. Look out for those. Sign up. Go to our social media. Sign up for our email list. We are going to every congressional district to have Democratic roundtables, listening events where we can connect with you on a more personal level. I've met many of you here already. We want to keep delivering this message. We want to keep this energy that Chairman Martin has brought to our party, and we are going to deliver and continue winning here in Connecticut. We are going to continue to help our partners in other states, but we can't do it on our own. We need every single one of you to step up and help us do that. So thank you, Vice Chairman Jimmy Tickey. I know our Treasurer Vanita was also on the call, past chairwoman and current DNC member. Nancy, DiNardo, and to the staff of the CT Democrats. You are the backbone of everything we do. Sarah, David, Desiree, Mackenzie, Patty, thank you for making today possible. And we are excited to be here delivering and servicing the Democrats across our state. Look forward to speaking to you all at our next event, and have a good day, everybody.